I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Gloss over this right now, I guess, and then if we decide to have a deeper conversation about it later, then we can. The 55th gate / gene key / hexagram from the I Ching will be the way of life in the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix. The previous way of life was the 37th, which is family, friendship, the bargain. So we built our lives around building families, cultivating friendships, and I scratch my back, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. And now the way of life will revolve around, I mean, the gate is called abundance, but the nature of it from a human design perspective, I would say, is about doing whatever feels right in the moment, like trusting your vibes. And in the gene key, this is where the mutation in 2027 takes place in the gene keys. And so if you go to the 55th gene key, it tells the whole story of the dragonfly being, I think it's called a nymph, living its entire life in water, and then it mutates into a dragonfly, a completely different species in a completely different environment. And then that's what the mutation taking place in 2027 is. In 2027, the 55th gene key is the audio for that is something that I listen to whenever I am stuck in victim consciousness. It is something that really helps me snap out of it. The shadow Every gene key has a shadow expression, a gift expression. So you can think of that as like the unconscious expression and the conscious expression. And then it has the Siddhi, which is spelled what? Siddhi, I think, which is a word from some Eastern religion. And that means kind of the like result of the living in the conscious expression, like what your life you can expect to experience if you're living in that higher expression. And it's not like you stay in a static state, really, but it is, in my experience, your primary location is the shadow of something until you've kind of hacked it. So I have talked about how post 2027, you will have many people feeling like they are living through an apocalyptic hell. And right next door to them, you will have people living a beautiful life. Not that there will be difficulties that everyone faces, but it will kind of determine the story you tell yourself, or if you're telling yourself a story about that. Okay. So the 55th is the only gene key in which the gift and the Siddhi have the same name. So the shadow is victim consciousness, and this is something, people who believe that life is happening to them. And the gift is freedom, people that understand that the story you tell yourself determines the reality that you experience. And then freedom is the life that you get as the result of choosing a story that doesn't suck ass, basically. Okay. Very important to understand the 55th gene key, in my opinion. I don't know a lot of gene keys, but I think it's worth, if you resonate with the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix stuff, to educate yourself on those. I do have a course on that. I do also have a, never mind. I don't know how to sell things, but I do have deeper dives available somewhere. Okay. What happened recently, and thank you to whoever told me this, but I don't remember who it was, is the Richard Rudd, the guy who wrote the Gene Keys, got a download and updated the 55th Siddhi from freedom to romance. And I don't feel like I want to super get into that. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs from this article, and we will put this on I'll try to remember to put this on our Patreon. Someone might have to nudge me. What if true freedom was never about escape, but about entering fully into life itself? The word freedom is somewhat haunted by its own shadow, the archetype of the victim. On one hand, freedom implies a form of captivity, bars to be broken, or a condition that needs to be transcended. At the level of the gift, this is exactly right. The great work of the 55th gene key at its middle frequency is liberation from victim consciousness, the slow, often difficult emergence from the emotional net of blame, complaint, and self-pity. Freedom, then, could be seen as the process of unraveling or remembering. It's the process similar to a snake sloughing off its skin. Oh, fucking weird. Thinking about last week's episode that we recorded 15 minutes ago. On the other hand, from a higher level, freedom can be seen as the ultimate state, a freedom from transcendent. Can you read this? Because my throat's doing something weird.
On the other hand, from a higher level, freedom can be seen as an ultimate state, a freedom from a transcendence, even a state of rest and utter relaxation. This might give the impression of a kind of arrival somewhere. And yet the quality of the Siddhi is not the cold, clean air of escape. It is warmth and intimacy. The recognition that the home you were seeking turned out to be the very ground you were standing on all along. The word freedom tends to orient consciousness away from something. The word romance, however, tends to orient consciousness towards everything. And this distinction is part of the reason why these two words are dancing together in this 55th gene key. says what romance actually means. Most people, when hearing the word romance applied to a city to the highest possible frequency of human consciousness, might feel a sense of hesitation. Romance? Isn't that candlelight, greeting cards, the pleasant flutter of new attraction that generally fades within 2 years? The hesitation is worth taking seriously because what has come down to us under the name of romantic love is really the shadow of something far older and more demanding. It is the longing, but without the initiation. It was twisted and became in time the idealization of another person by projecting the divine onto another human being, which is why it so often ends in disappointment. The troubadours of medieval southern France, those wandering poet-musicians who gave us the very word romance, were not composing love songs in the modern sense. They were initiates carrying a hidden teaching encoded in the language of human longing and transformation. What passed down to us through the centuries was all the feeling, but stripped of its proper context. Romance with capital R asks something far more demanding than sentimentality. Can I love what is actually in front of me? Can I remain present to this person, this behavior, including the difficulty, the darkness, and the way it refuses to be what I want? True romance is not a soft teaching. It is one of the most rigorous orientations available to a human being.
The way of life as we move into 2027 is going to be transcending our own individual victim consciousness, which fully lines up with what we've been discussing on the last few episodes, right? So victim consciousness is essentially narrative. It's mythology, stories you're telling yourself about how you have no responsibility in your own experience and feeling like a victim of circumstance. And the freedom from that is waking up to your own mythology and turning off the projector that is projecting narrative onto experiences. And the city of romance is falling in love with life to such an extent that you do not experience circumstantial fluctuations in that romance. And so we've talked about this a little bit. It's interesting to see this, like, it's now, I guess, what this is saying is it is possible. I know it is possible, but at the root of victim consciousness is the belief that there is a hierarchy of experiences and that your contentment is contingent on favorable experiences. And when I say contentment, I want to say, like, there are seasons. There are seasons of loss. And we are not obligated to be like happy-go-lucky through those seasons. But when I define contentment, I define that as like not in resistance to. So obviously I've been in this period of grief for the last 7 months. When these waves come, it's like time to grieve, And I think it could be easy to say sometimes when I say these things, like, well, it's easy for you to say you have financial comfort and love and everything else. I haven't had these things my entire life. I've had these things for the last 6 years. And this contentment that I zeroed in on was at a point in my life I've talked about where I was homeless, did not have 25 cents to put into a payphone. That's what we had back then, to call someone. And even if I did, there was no one to call. I did not have friends. I didn't have a partner. My family I hadn't spoke to. I had nowhere to go. And I, realized I'm about to sleep on this bench for the night. And I didn't. I ended up getting picked up by someone who tried to sexually assault me, but that's a story for another day. But in that moment, I went, but I'm okay. It's about 4 years into my awakening. I'm okay, I just am. It's not my favorite experience, but it's an experience. And that's the neutral answer. It just is an experience.
Yeah.
And if we like part of the reason that I feel so grateful for everything in my life is because I have experienced the absence of those things. But I also hold the complexity that like the house could burn down tomorrow. We could break up. You could die. Fucking it all could be ripped away. You and my kids could be in a car accident. I have OCD, obviously. You and my kids could be in a car accident, all die, and I could have nothing tomorrow. Like that's how fragile life is. And I don't want to experience that. And if I did experience that, it would be insanely life-altering, consciousness-altering, devastating. But it wouldn't, I wouldn't like throw my belief system out the window because I just know through so many experiences and the awareness that I hold at this point that like everything that is, it just is. And the imagination that I come from just wants to know what things look like. And my contentment, which I'm defining as lack of resistance, is not circumstantial. Obviously, I prefer the good stuff. But the contentment, the baseline of contentment is not circumstantial. And as I've cultivated that over the last couple of decades and released attachment after attachment after attachment and story of how I need things to be or whatever, my ability to feel and experience the beauty in something like grief rather than the resistance is, I don't know, supernatural. Not like my ability is supernatural, but the experience of it is supernatural. Like, I can't even explain to you the beauty of grief when you aren't in resistance to reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the resistance to reality comes from the belief that contentment is circumstantial and that, you know, there is a hierarchy of experiences and that only good experiences should exist. It's, of course, we prefer the good ones. But what we say with chasing good vibes only is that the difficult ones, painful ones shouldn't exist. And from a soul perspective, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
Because the soul is curious. It wants to know what things feel like. So when we go, this shouldn't exist, my life should only be easy or whatever, then you watch someone who has money, they sabotage the money. You watch someone who has love, they sabotage the love, you know? So there is something in us that wants to experience the full spectrum of human experience. And we're all one thing. So you see one person experiences what it's like to never have to worry about money a day in their life. One person who struggles their whole life, another person who experiences both, you know. It's just different nodes of the imagination. But when we say that this is how you should experience it and this is wrong, then you rob yourself of that feeling of romance that makes you feel connected to the entire thing. So that really resonates.
Yeah,
for me.
That resonates a lot. I love that.
All right, so then we'll maybe talk about that more as I get further into it. But the next thing I wanted to talk about, and there's so many angles to come at this from, but this is definitely your question to answer. All right. We did an episode. We have new listeners. So, okay.
We have new listeners. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So not everyone's been around for 2 years. Okay. So I believe it was in 2024. It was right after we started this podcast. You were in a rabbit hole of Laura Knight's work with the Cassiopeians. Laura Knight channels the Cassiopeians. And
Laura Knight Yazek.
You're Laura Knight Yazek.
There's some other Laura Knight out there.
And so we did quite a few episodes that featured very dense books that you were reading, and we talked about the mechanics in there. A lot of the mechanics in there are pretty similar to Law of One. Mm-hmm. Went a little bit deeper. We've also done episodes about you trying to kind of get, like, because there's a forum, you kind of trying to get into the forum and then realizing these are not my people. I like the info in this book, but this is not a community that feels right for me or whatever. So it's just come up a lot over years because there's so many books and so much information that, you dig to the bottom of the rabbit hole, whenever you're into something, but then you do eventually, because you read such dense books so fast that you do eventually hit the bottom. So you've listened to every podcast on the topic, whatever. A couple of months ago, we did an episode, I want to say it was in the winter, no short-term memory anymore. And you talked about a podcast that you listened to that was warning people about the dangers of Laura Knight Yazek. And this was interesting to you because you find multiple sides of everything to be interesting. And we share that. And I think it's weird, in my opinion, to not want to hear multiple sides of things.
Yeah.
So, we talked about a podcast that you watched, and we talked about things that you didn't necessarily vibe with her. And then I think we were supposed to talk about this because I do look at the comments on YouTube for like the first couple days, and then I tend to not go back and look usually, but I did end up seeing this one because I started looking at notifications this week. Okay. So the person who made the podcast that you watched,
the one that's criticizing
Laura Knight Yazek, commented, I think, and it's really long, and so I guess we're just going to take it. I'm going to skim it. Hi, I think you're referring to the Confused Wanderer and me. Todd, the Confused Wanderer, is Laura's cousin, and he's been following the C's since the beginning, Cassiopeians. We have files and files and files of things that Laura has done. First of all, she's not channeling anything. We have the evidence for that. Also, she can't come back to the USA for a reason. We also were doing a live today about why the French government investigated her. Warning, it's very, very dark. This project we're working on has many ex-members as well. Documentary coming soon. I'm legitimately stoked for that. The C's are a cult, and they're running it like Heaven's Gate. Our mission is in exposing this is to try to stop the Heaven's Gate ending from happening here. Thank you for listening to our videos and having an open mind. And then the next paragraph says, Laura is not a good person. I beg you to research her. If you want, Todd can send you all the receipts. You actually should let Todd do that. Attempting murder charges, tons of fraud, blackmail, etc. Laura, in my opinion, is a full-on psychopath. Also, what people are missing is that Laura is still a fundamentalist Christian. She replaced the apocalypse with the wave, and she replaced Jesus with herself. Let's just start there. I'll come back to the second half.
Oh, I mean, that was a lot in that, yeah.
Oh, wait, I guess this part might be relevant. Also, in the Law of One, which is the other channel thing that has a lot of similar themes, right?
Yeah.
The Cassiopeians are fourth density STS. If you want to know what fourth density is, we've covered all this in past episodes. In the second reading ever, the Cassiopeians tell them that they're STS. So why is Laura lying about it? The Laura rabbit hole is deep. I beg you to stop saying Laura is harmless because she is not. She's tried unaliving people. Please research this. Laura is extremely dangerous given her past records. But then again, thank you for being open. Okay. All right. I'm just going to ask you questions, okay, to keep this, because I know that I know that little fucking encyclopedia you got going in your head is a lot of info that it's going to be hard not to gloss over. Okay. Where do I want to start? I want to start with this question. Can you tell me what about the Cassiopeians? So it's, okay, first of all, the Cassiopeians are future versions of Laura Knight Yazek, right?
That's what, yeah, it's a little more complex than that, but that's what they say. Mm. That's what the Cassiopeians have said.
Okay. So similar to a Bashar situation, similar to me and my aliens.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I lost my train of thought last week, but I was talking about,
in a nutshell too, just sorry, because I have a lot of thoughts. I'm just going to try to say some of them. That is like also, they nail it down to like, they call themselves the Cassiopeians and all this separation. And then at some point it's like, hey, I'm you from the future. It's your higher self. Right. So like everybody has that, but this one's being expressed this way through the concept of a channeling and a separate group of beings, and all the myth that is around that. So again, in the context from last week's podcast, like myth is very important in all of this. Personal myth being publicly displayed and played with,
Okay. The thing I think I forgot to land this plane in last week's episode that I've said before, but just relevant to this conversation as we get into this. When I started publicly talking about the aliens for a long time on podcasts, I would just say that was something that happened right after I died. And then when I came out of the woo closet and started acknowledging that they still talk to me, something that was quickly unsettling for me was that people would say, can you ask the aliens about, can you ask the aliens about, can you ask the aliens about? Because I don't, outside of that first few years, I don't engage with the aliens like that. Like the aliens show up every once in a while. I'll ask about something if I'm genuinely stumped. But for the most part, they show up to tell me to pull my head out of my ass about something, right? I did not have the context of them being me in the future until the last 6 years. But I knew that I didn't like the way that people wanted to make the aliens, like I could say something that I put together and people would be like, did the aliens say that though? And I remember being like, what the fuck is that thing? I didn't like that people wanted to make the aliens into the business card in their locker. Do you know what I mean? It was like just the fact that it wasn't a human, people wanted to immediately like put above them. Mm-hmm. And it did always feel like the aliens were deeply connected to my point of view. So I now have a theory that we've reached a point, and I remember I had a dream about this or a vision about this, about aliens coming down to Earth and putting on human suits, like giant gods, not aliens, gods, putting on human suits. I believe that vision now was like, we are merging with our higher self. It's happening in this moment, and this is why so many people are channeling their higher self, because we have come to the moment where, and your higher self is just your aware self that knows it's a video game, right? Okay. So this is this lady's version of that.
Yeah. And and like just to add more nuance to that, like the criticism in that comment where she said she's channeling nothing is just like, to reveal some of the complexity that's behind Laura's work is like right there. We have to stop and talk about what you mean by channeling, because the woman doing the comment is channeling her higher self where she's at right now. Right. So it's like channeling nothing is not, you're not even engaging on a certain level of complexity to understand Laura's work, but yet you're here criticizing with this weird argument. She's not channeling anything. What are you talking about? Like, what do you're channeling? This isn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like so many things already through this is like, yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
The implication by saying she's channeling nothing is implying that she's knowingly, intentionally
lying,
committing fraud.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to start
which is
here.
a form of channeling. I mean, I'm saying that'll get too meta, but keep going.
But we will maybe do that.
Yeah.
Let's start here. Laura might be a bad person. How do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, totally. Laura, whoever Laura is doesn't really matter in the situation. The way I'm trying to get information out in the world, it's like that is, you can get into that. And if there's data in it, like if I can sense there's like a negative thing that she's projecting, then I want to know more about that. And because I want to understand how to discern the information that's coming from this person. If I see a shadow, I'm going to accept it for what it is. If the information's still interesting, I'm going to keep holding that in the context of whatever's being delivered. Like,
right.
And therefore, then it's all added information. It doesn't really matter.
What do you do with information like this? Someone's got 5 books of channeled information from future versions of themselves on the mechanics of reality. What are you using that information for?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning, I wanted to understand where the information was interesting and complex and deep. And then, so I wanted to understand where it was coming from. So the person, and then like, I'm trying to understand, I guess with more refined, more macro, I'm trying to understand myself and therefore what the reality is. And so at any juncture, if it's something that's helping me understand myself, then that's kind of where I'm pointing the information. If it's about the mechanics of reality, then I start pointing it that way. But it's like they're all intertwined. And so I think I'm trying to get from what you would say is a more objective perspective. I'm trying to listen to information and then set the data where I feel like it works in my myth.
Okay, so I'll describe how I engage with information. I've said this before on here, but like everything's kind of built around my near-death experience. And I had a near-death experience. Things were said to me during that. And then for the next few years, I had these experiences mostly while dreaming with these what showed up as aliens. And everything they told me and showed me didn't make a ton of sense to me, but it felt very true. And it didn't make a ton of sense to me because I didn't have categories of reason and because the things they were showing me are just now starting to take place. And so it was a much different world 25 years ago, right? So anytime I hear new context of reality, I'm looking for places where it fits. And you and I were talking about this the other day. Like, I don't know why, but I find it so fucking satisfying when something fits over something perfectly. So we were talking about how learning about autism and masking, finding out you are autistic, and then laying that over top of the process of, deconstructing the cross-a planning or what, like learning your human design, how those fit. It's all different words for the same containers.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about how satisfying that is. So whenever I'm listening to information like that, like when you were telling me, and I'm going to have you get into this, but you're telling me about service to self, service to others, I've always been trying to figure out where service to self and service to others describes something I'm already familiar with, because I find that that's what expanding your awareness is. It's giving names to things that were previously unnameable or named incorrectly.
Yeah.
Right? So finding out that I have extremely low blood pressure, so dysautonomia, rather than I'm lazy. And now I have that new context, which gives me a way to be able to fix the problem or work with it rather than a disempowering narrative, right?
Yeah. Neutralizes it. Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, what I'm looking for always is to build a map of consciousness for myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I watch you engage with these things, you're like on a scavenger hunt, or you're like harvesting context for your own personal worldview, which if we could look at your worldview, like if you like connected all the dots on a whiteboard or something, it would have to be a very big whiteboard, we would see chunks of Carl Jung, you would see all of these different thought leaders and channelers and whatever, and it would be taking what resonates and leave the rest. Like there wouldn't be one personality at the top where you're like,
or even one like ideal of looking at reality, one way of looking at it. If it is, it's like there's a feeling of that somewhere, and connecting all these dots with all the different ones is getting closer to this one understanding, But yeah, it's a conglomerate of other And it's, I like that idea of the whiteboard where there's like a Carl Jung over here. There's, then there's old Christianity being in there's all of that stuff in their little nodes. And they're all connected in their own way right now because they're on the whiteboard. So it's not all of who Carl Jung is, but his ideas, certain ones stuck. So that's that flavor. When I find something like the Cassiopeians, what excites me and makes me go all the way to the bottom of it is I can sense all of these other lights are dimly being lit by this new idea. Once I understand the idea, it is that satisfaction of it overlays, and everything else lights up brighter now because this is informing more context to all of those other ones that I've already like solidified as true to me. They all start talking again. And so then that's an expansion. And now sometimes you have to then go re-look at the Carl Jung stuff and go, well, in this context with this actually doesn't work anymore, these certain parts. And so they drop off. Yeah.
Or I thought I understood what that meant, and now I actually
understand it, and it amplifies the other one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And in many ways, I would say that once you go through an awakening, this becomes the game of reality, right? Mm-hmm. So when I think of like what brings me the most, and I'd not say it's the game of reality forever, but I would say the game that you and I play that we find the most satisfaction in is hunting for kernels of knowledge and kind of placing them on this map. And then we get on this podcast and we talk about what we've added to our map. You and I are interested in different things. So I am, in the time that you've been into Cassiopeians, I have deeply learned about autism,
the robes,
ADHD, the robes. I'm much more likely to get into something that's very social, like how humans are working together. And what's really satisfying is when we can get like lay two of those things over. So I heard of service to self, service to others for the first time in 2000. You had already read
The Law of One
back to back, the whole series. I can't read like that. I don't have the attention span for that. I had some other guy that I never heard from again on this podcast on my Patreon, and we talked about it. And service to self, service to others is one of these things that just clicks immediately. And I go, that's true. I don't understand what it's saying yet, but I know it's true. And so then that is a riddle for me to solve. Yeah. And all of these riddles are always using words that don't line up with our conditioning, which is one of the fun things about reality. So it's why human design uses all the words like that thing we just read about romance. We already have a connotation for romance, but now you get taken on this journey to figure out what that means. So I knew that service to self and service to others was true, but I can't yet tell you because I know it's not the way that my conditioning would tell me. I then have gone down the rabbit hole a couple times myself trying to learn more about that concept. And then, like I said, when you were talking about Laura Knight, we really ground on how that concept would line up with a life that is described in robes, which also feels true to me, but also lines up with what the alien showed me. And also lines up with the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix. Like, I'm looking for a reality in which yes is the answer, what was the question? Like, all of these things are all true. They're not contradicting. Like, that's the sensation I'm always looking for, right? Okay. Now, obviously, and you've shared this on the podcast, when you first get into a topic as a mechanism of your immersion into it, you do take everything as Bible at first, right? Because that's how you immerse. Yeah,
it's kind of like what it feels more like I'm putting on, as I said this before, I'm putting on the robe of the Cassiopeian. I'm putting on this world. Right. What is this world, And to do that, to understand the world, you kind of, for a moment, and I always know that I'm doing it. I'm like, I drop an anchor somewhere, in a grounding position, and then I'm going to dive into this. This is all real, everything they say, So until I feel like I'm in that world, okay, like this is, I get what you're saying. And then I start to pull that anchor back and get my perspective of what, and then I navigate my way out of it if I need to. But it is a like immersion process for sure. And
you have like a honeymoon phase a little bit. And so you might think, much more highly of like Laura Knight Yazek as a person.
Yeah. And this is what's
early
interesting is you can observe the pedestalization that happens when you go into that world. And that's why the criticisms that this person is having, it's very, of course, I get it. Like I hear you, you know, and I know that's there. There's a trust that you have to have with yourself, I think sometimes, at least for me in the way that I like to gather information. And I think some of the core things that I learned early on in awakening is like these internal mechanics, like everything's inside of you and all of these things. So there's like a core thing that I feel like I picked up that is a frequency of just trusting myself to be able to navigate backwards out of whatever I put myself in. And so there's like, you can feel, and I don't think, you know, I would discern that Laura is not projecting worship me. I'm the only one that does this. And like, I don't feel that at all. And I don't see it in any of her work. But if you engage with the information and you kind of like really go into that world, like you do end up leaning on whatever Laura's saying. And like, you're kind of on the edge of your seat for the next word that when she's channeling what, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And so you do pedestalize it a bit.
Can you tell me the most consequential mechanics you learned from Laura Knight? Like ones that have impacted your overall worldview that you still use?
To me, it's felt like, I think there's a lot of things I've picked up, but the biggest thing is some kind of what feels like to me more of a solid compass of my orientation in a potential hyperdimensional metaphysical Russian doll layered reality.
Hyperdimensional meaning you're existing in multiple dimensions at once.
Yeah, and like the just these ideas that are in the essence of a lot of ancient teachings and understandings of consciousness and reality itself. The more modern context to like look at all of those and have like an idea that fits all of the religions and everything that everybody's talking about is this kind of what we would say in modern day is like a video game reality where there's a perspective outside of the game system and then there's a perspective you can tap into when you take the game really seriously, and there's like this separation of one's awareness. That is like in all religious stuff, it's in all philosophy, it is this like kind of separate world, material and like sensation kind of stuff. So that is something that it's one of those things that just always felt true to me. It's like why you're into religion, why you get into ghosts, why you get into the imagination is there's this like other place you can get divine inspiration and invent something and succeed in the world. And so there's this like mystery behind everything. And that's always been the little kid magician in me wanting to play with a reality like that and being fascinated by it is always like felt very real. And I am looking for information to understand that, you know? So and I would say this is like, for me, after digging through all of that, what I like that is a centered thing where I feel their description of densities, different places that certain awareness dwells for a multitude of experiences, how all of those densities stack on each other and influence each other through like just the way energy moves and kind of distills down. Understanding the like bigger scheme of like natural phenomena that is like equivalent to what we would say is nature here in the woods and how robust of a machine that is, but also, you know, incorporates what seems to be free moving individual autonomy, but limited by this other nature, energy of nature that is like an organizing principle. How that same pattern like applies in the Russian doll system, so in each density. And so then overall there's another natural evolution of like wave pulsing, breathing in and out, pushing and pulling, that all of those things are functioning in this like connected way. And so the story that she tells, it's what I find so fascinating, it's like you can get lost in the details of the information. One, you can get lost in the trust of the channel and Laura, who's saying what, who's real, who's bad, who's deceptive. You know, you can get lost in the trying to physicalize ideas and metaphors that are meant to be applied inside of you, you know, internally, but they're being presented as these physical ideas and physical beings. So there's many traps within it. Overall, the work in itself and who she is and her story is, and to me, it's one of those. It's a riddle in itself. It's like its own Russian doll thing. The way Carl Jung realized at one point, like my life story, my individual expression, as if I do it in alignment, is a riddle for people to learn about themselves. It's like my everyday movement and just being authentic is that. So the story of her getting psychically attacked and having these kind of people come out and criticize and take a binary stance on a piece of work that is actually like trying to... where she is in the neutral part of it, but it's like her description of her life and everything. You can understand metaphysical reality even in that, you know. So what I found from that the information, all in all the books, her life, her podcasts, her daily channels now, is that there's, it's just riddled with helpful information through symbolism and metaphor, mostly to me, it has been for the mechanics, the metaphysical like mechanics of the hyperdimensional reality. And for me, it's like a compass of orientation of where one is at. Therefore, it's easier to understand my experience and what others are doing, you know, and where we're at, where we're moving, where we're coming from, all of those things. It's a helpful like map to place my daily experience over and go, oh, interesting. That's where this line, that's why. Okay. Almost like a tool of astrology or human design. It's kind of that, you know, but just very metaphysical. And a lot of the stuff is stories. Like some of the stuff is not, it's not like real on the physical level. It's a metaphor for an internal mechanism that you're becoming aware of, you know.
I guess I'm looking for more of like a concrete answer, like service to self explained as da 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 da, and this is how I applied it, or like fourth density explained as da 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 da, and this is how I applied it. But
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like all of that, the service to self, service to others is something that I understood from the law of one, a little deeper than just what it seems on the surface level. Like I went through a depth of that, and then I was like, okay. As I got to the cassiopeian material, they'd expanded that a lot, but they're all. And then the density specifically, they all fit in the box of like the mechanics and metaphysical parts of reality. But that involves like psychology, the spiritual world, which is like kind of half materializing and half not, energy, electromagnetism. It's kind of...
Yeah, there were concepts we went over on the podcast. Service to self, service to others, fourth density, the moving into fourth density kind of as we speak, the concept of an open portal.
Yeah, those are huge.
You know, I'm just trying to remember the concepts that we're really heavily engaged with. Those
were the big ones. I mean, time travel and stuff is in it. You know, the time traveling Nazis kind of bumps in. That was Giorgiani's kind of info, but they blend in with these two.
Okay. So, this is on an episode we deleted. I talk constantly about the book Robes. And the reason that I like the book Robes, it first of all came to me like synchronistically. I can't remember what it was. I think it was on a comment of something of my own that was like old, really old. And I don't know how I came across it, but then I saw someone say this sounds like the book Robes or something. So then I went and found the book Robes. First of all, it's very small, which is like how the universe knows to deliver a book to me if you expect me to read something. And it's this woman, Penny Kelly, who's like, I think she's a boomer. And this happened in the 80s. These tiny aliens that look like robed beings came to her and started talking to her while she was having a Kundalini awakening. And so the book is her telling her story of what they told her and it like wrecking her life. And one thing that I like about it is that she's telling the story, but like it's the same thing. She can't comprehend what they're saying because she doesn't have the categories of reason for it. And so the things that the robe said to her they line up with what the aliens showed me about the future. And they also line up with 2027 Cross of Sleeping Phoenix stuff. And then just my general vibe of things. So it just doesn't feel true to me that we are going to be a global society much longer. And so when I see something like, I'm starting to see people say stuff like, we're bringing sicknesses. We're bringing Ebola to several different countries. They took the hantavirus to some tiny island where people didn't even get COVID there because you know what I mean? Like we have to stop fucking traveling around. So I'm watching this, like these things like us go away. The cross of planning was a global collective thing. And now it's going back to an individual thing. So I'm watching it. So it just resonates with me that we will eventually not really leave our house much. This book resonated it's just like decades old book. And it talked about like reality would be based around radical self-responsibility. And when I found this book was around the same time that I got into the 2027 stuff. And the media that the stuff I was consuming on the internet was people really villainizing individualism and stuff. And like, we need a village and a tribe and all whatever. And when I'm like, reality's going to go in the opposite direction of that. So it was really cool to see this book. And there were things in the book that like, I understood that Penny Kelly didn't point out, because I don't even know that Penny Kelly, especially when she wrote that book, even really understood the context because it was decades ago. But she said that these houses, that people would live in like compounds of all different sizes. And that everyone had their own tiny house. And then there would be a main house where certain things were. But every room in the main house had an exterior door. And I know, or I believe that is because we are going to become so introverted. And what we now call autism is going to be everyone in 50 years, that we will commune when we feel like communing, but there will you need to be able to walk into the house and go into the kitchen without having to interact with people if you don't want to, which is the world that we would build if we, right?
Yeah, infrastructure would be centered around different purposes. So autonomy is a main one. So infrastructure is going to be built with a way in and out without anybody seeing you.
Right.
Not because they're secretive, it's because they function better with autonomy. Right?
Yeah. Like if we're going to engage, it needs to be like premeditated and consensual, which we are already seeing a move towards that. So anyway, I immediately bought every book that this woman made and went and sought her out on every platform. And I've seen her say a couple things that I see. I've seen her rehash robes a couple times. But other than that, I don't resonate with her. She's actually, what I've seen, pretty swept up in narrative. And so it was just kind of instantly like, oh, whatever thread you had for the robes thing that really connects with me, it was a very short thread. And so when I speak highly of robes, it's in no way an endorsement of this woman. I don't know this woman, and I haven't found myself drawn or magnetized to anything else she does. I don't engage with things that way. I'm not looking for a person to follow. I'm like looking for like concepts. And so if you told me she's a terrible person, I'd be like, okay, like that wouldn't impact. When I care about someone's morals or whatever is when I'm like going to be in a personal relationship with you. If I'm not going to be in a personal relationship with you, I guess knowing your shadow is beneficial, but I felt like I spotted her shadow in the book. People reveal their shadow in the way that they talk. And her shadow was actually interesting information in the book.
Yeah, and this is exactly how I engage with the Laura Knight material. Is when I see deception or some distortion, shadow thing, it doesn't make me leave the material. It makes me go, oh, interesting. I'm going to keep an eye on that too to understand it. Helps me understand the information that's coming through and everything. I think there also the temptation in culture to when any time someone references somebody's material or some work, most people listening take that as a full endorsement of everything that this person has ever done or who they are as an individual. And that caught in the programming of looking for a savior, looking to put out the bad and only light up the good. And those are all like judgments coming from different people's different experiences of the world, so that's the thing that's being played out. So that it's hard when I have somebody like, I want to hear this person's argument towards Laura Knight stuff, because I'm interested in. I don't agree with a lot of things either. It hasn't made me not see the profound information that's in here. It's just very nuanced. But the fact that you're casting such a short argument that's caught in a narrative of like what you believe about it just shows me you're not on the level to discuss the complexity of which is in the material. Like you're in some ways there's a bubble around people like that, that can't get to the real truth and the meaning of what they're saying, because people get triggered by biases so quickly and want to cast this person as a certain thing, and you're not reading the material, the thing, like that you're criticizing. It's a meta thing,
Yeah, in many ways it goes back to the story thing, that main character syndrome story thing, where so much of this is story, we have receipts and she's bad and also she's not channeling and we have proof of that and whatever. And it's okay, so the reason I asked you what you got from this material is, do any of these things impact what you took from the material, which was context that you took and you put it up against your current map of reality, and there were places where it fit. There were places where it gave language to things that you were already experiencing. And so does Laura being bad, even if it is fraud, even if it was straight up, we found out there was fraud.
Yeah, because the level of which I'm engaging with it is, it's it's so hard to describe, but it's an energetic vibe thing. So if it's all fraud, I've already got that awareness covered. I'm aware, because I'm engaging with reality, as in I'm the trickster out thing. I'm in the thing. So, it's it's meta. So if it's all a deception, it's brought me to a place of awareness where I'm okay. Is it fake? And the reality for me, with the context that I'm working within that, it's not been challenged enough for an argument. I'm sitting here ready for somebody to argue it. When I sought out people who are criticizing to try to understand these other parts that I don't agree with a little bit, and nobody has an argument that is taking the material and metaphysically applying it and doing looking at it from that perspective. I don't think a lot of people are engaging with her material in the way that I am. And I'm not saying that as I'm doing it right, but most people that are engaging with it end up in the community and the little, what they're saying is a cult. And it's kind of culty. But I'm playing with the information that is not from a place of disempowering. I'm siphoning up all the information. It's just ripe for information because it's deeply complex, hyperdimensional. There's a channel idea, and so it's all coming from this other place. And I'm always holding the idea that this is potentially useful, collective, universal information coming through somebody that is filtering it, and they're putting their own spin on it the entire time. And so there's many things that come up that I'm that you just understood that and said that in a certain way, and that's coming through your biases as your generation and a boomer. And I hear what they were trying to say, and I hear your distortion of it, and I'm capturing my own meaning of it.
Yeah.
And your distortion of it doesn't really affect anything except for it gives me information on where your filter is not super clear. Therefore, this information coming through is going to get caught in that little whirlpool and come out distorted and wrong. And so the listener has to be able to discern those things. And when you're operating from the mechanics of knowing you are the reality you're creating and all of that, and you're communicating back and forth, you can do that. But if you're not doing it that way, you get this rabbit hole will trap you. And so it'll create these kind of disempowered cult-like expressions around it, you know.
She's essentially using a Ouija board.
Yeah, it's like what do they call it? A scry board or something. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially a Ouija board.
Okay. So the channeled messages are not full, long, eloquent sentences with context and clarity. It's like words, and then she keeps asking clarifying questions to try to understand what they are saying. But her interpretation is limited to her as a filter. And
Which,
so
again, there's so many meta-analyses through this, which I would love to argue with somebody that can go into it with the awareness. But the way that the channel interacts with her and her questions, it's never creating a scenario where it's like the channel is the say end all be all. When she asks a question that's a dumb question that is basically disempowering her mental state to think the problem through, and she just wants the handout answer, they don't answer. And they go, that's not the way this works. Mm-hmm. You know how to do that. And they tiptoe around what their idea is of like respecting free will. And so if you really think about somebody that's trying to help someone and respecting their free will and deeply understands that, this is all hidden behind how hard it is to be STO from the context of programming of the way we think reality is. It's very hidden, and behind that, that's how an entity would ask or would act. They would never give you the answer. They help guide you towards a place that they can sense will give you the answer you're looking for. Not even the answer that they think is right.
They can't give you the answer because you will turn it into the business card in the fucking locker.
Yeah.
Not to quote the Bible, but you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. You have to initiate into understanding non-physical reality. And so they could say it to you plain as fucking day and you still won't fucking understand it. Like what we talked about on last week's episode. I understand that when I'm saying I no longer am anybody, I've heard that said for decades and did not know what the fuck that meant until I came to a state where I'm like, oh, I've lost the desire to play a role, to be seen as anything. And I haven't even fully lost it yet, but I've started to experience losing that. And all I can do is talk about my experience with that. But you just have to be initiated. Like your fucking soul just has to go through the processes of your identity being shattered over and over and over and over and over again until you just get conscious, you know? I can't explain it to you in a way that's going to make you be able to stop that, like to turn that part of yourself off. I mean, I do think that like us talking about STO, SDS, self-obsession, like the main character syndrome, talking about and our experiences with that, there are so many people who have come back since that episode and been like, oh my God, this is making things click. But it's only because everyone's already initiating. And so it's just helping to give containers, which ultimately is why you enjoyed this woman's work, just because like not a lot of people have put these mechanics into writing. You know what I mean? That is like modern day writing. We have ancient stuff, but it's lost in translation and everything else. So you just have a person who's just documenting. And that was one thing that I found as someone with severe ADHD extremely interesting. And I don't know, I'm envious, I guess, in some ways of the ability to record those experiences. she's not the only person having those experiences by a long stretch, but she has that unique boomer ability of getting work done. You know what I mean? That a lot of people have these transcendent experiences and then they can't be left-brained enough to
translate it all down,
get it all down. Yeah. I mean, these books are gigantic, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting in all of it is this, like, it is kind of one person's own awakening process, like publicly displayed in a certain sense, like through books and these transcripts of this person's experience. And that's what I got pretty early on, was like, she was at, when this all happened, it always happens at somebody's like bottom level of existence. And then this cracking open starts to happen. And her documenting all of that is like, it helps you become aware. Like, she was trying to get herself out of the way and disintegrating like her idea of herself. And this thing comes through. And then over time, as they transcribe, because it's all documented over years and years, you see the channel get more clear at times and more distorted at times. And so you're having to discern like what resonates, what feels true and not, and all of it. And that kind of creates this like sub-awareness of how can this information be misunderstood or purposely like slightly true and slightly not, to get me into a certain way of thinking that like is pulling my energy, so it's really dense. But I think that the entire story is a riddle in itself of her awakening, that it's just helpful. You pick up helpful patterns. It's not the same thing's not going to happen to you, but it's like we were talking about last week. There is a like certain repetitious universal thing that you apply your story and symbols on that activates you. And so that is all occurring too, and I think what's most interesting to me about it, in its present form even, is like, and there's another lesson to be learned on top of when someone is doing this, like being authentic and actually does have a connected channel to universal truths and is doing a decent job at translating it. It's like a firework in the matrix system. And so it's light, it attracts parasites, it attracts everything. That one is trying to get energy off of it, and so manipulate stories, and then also stop it because it's awakening other people. And it creates a initiation kind of element in the person who's channeling. Like, their life starts to fall into disarray and challenges at multi levels. And the way that person goes through that process is like also a lesson to observe and watch what happens. And I would say at this present moment, she has attracted a lot of attention over a lot of time and has an isolated community. But there's more distortions now than ever in these current transmissions. I still get bits of truth through them because I'm looking for these macro things and kind of within the deceptions, other elements of information. And so over time, it's like these things you get distorted and you build your own worlds. And I think for me, it's not distorted as in wrong. It's now highly filtered through Laura. And Laura is becoming the Cassiopeians and has to learn through that. And there are many distortions and hiccups along the way. And I think for a community that's already centered around her and praising her and keeping her up on that, ripe for distortions and, little falsities. And so
I do want to say you read these books and then you give me a summary of things as you're going. And one thing that did stand out to me about her work is in the books with the stories of her life, I don't remember there being a lot of like personal responsibility. Like, you know what I mean? There were very clear villains and it was never her. She was a victim of what many of us have this, right? Like, you hear us tell our life stories, and until you're like, you really hit a certain level of awareness, Like if you heard me tell my life story in 2018, I'm the hero in most of the stories, and, you know, like, here are all the people that wronged me. And then if you heard me tell those same stories now, I would be like, well, here's what I thought was happening. Here's what they thought was happening. Here, what was actually happening. You know, here's what, here's the heart, like, here's the things I did, or here's the way I put myself into the situation and then couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. You know what I mean? And her stories were very much, here's all the people that wronged me, all the people I had to get away. You know, they were still at that level of consciousness. So these were written a long time ago. I can't say whether or not she has transcended that. I do believe this ability to be self-aware and hold complexity is, for the most part, a feature of the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix and fourth density, whatever you want to call it. And so, for the most part, it is new consciousness. And so I can't say whether or not she's operating in that new consciousness. I can say that I did a lot of harm in my life that I did not consciously know I was doing when I lived in a reality in which I thought I was the victim in every single circumstance. So if you tell me she's a bad person and she does harm, I can see that in the way that she frames herself as the victim in those situations. I can clearly see, let's say, for example, like there was originally a guy that Frank, right? That was doing the board. She was channeling.
It was kind of, they didn't know. It was both of them. But I think Frank, I mean, these other people claim it was Frank the whole time. There was, I think, maybe the initial, she was already interested in some kind of phenomena that was happening when she was doing possession releasing for people. And this thing started to happen. And I think went to Frank because Frank was already doing that or knew about it. And then this thing sparked off where it was primarily Frank as the initiate through it, but Frank amplified when Laura was around. And so it became like there's something between the two of them that makes this channel extra strong and grooved, and they worked that out over time where then they become kind of enemies, and something, one of them, or a phenomena between the both of them when they are in certain different frequencies creates a distortion of some sort, for sure. You can pick that up within the story and the way the channelings, there's a difference when there's like a tonal difference in what's being said when Frank is doing it versus her.
Right. And those mechanics can be explained in human design, like what happens when two people are in each other's energy. And so her story is like she realizes that Frank is distorting the channel and that she needs to get rid of Frank. Frank's story, I'm super oversimplifying and paraphrasing here. Frank's story is she stole it and copyrighted it. Once again, that's maybe not the exact facts, but something to that effect. So, to the point that we were talking about a couple weeks ago, both of those people can be completely living that reality. Okay. She can believe that Frank is distorting the channel and think that she is protecting the channel by copywriting it. And actually she's being shitty to Frank because the distortion might have been like, it's time for you guys to go your own separate ways. Like this whole time you were actually engaging with Frank's higher self and your higher self, and now it needs to diverge, whatever. These people aren't conscious, clearly. They're not self-aware yet at the point that this happened. Mm-hmm. So then she thinks she's protecting it by copywriting it, and he feels ripped off and robbed, and they're both right.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of shit that we do when we're not conscious. And this is where holding complexity comes in, because if they're conscious now, like she should be able to look back and be like, it felt true to me at the time, but I can also see that I had a shadow. I was afraid he was going to take it, whatever. Taking it, thinking you're protecting it, and then copywriting it could very well be some greed shit that you were doing, and you didn't know that you were doing it out of greed. So this is just an example of like the difference between a hand-wringing Skeletor character who's completely conscious of what they're doing and someone who's operating out of subconscious motives and doesn't know. And so her story was her story, you know, like it was her perspective of what happened. And of course, when she's telling her story, all humans have a tendency to paint themselves in a kind of favorable light. So there could have been stuff in there with that. But I think that usually you can pick up on those details, and those are just like features of being a human.
Here's something I just want to, another thought that I feel like is a good example of some of the nuance in some of these things. So there's, and emphasizing the idea that even within a channeled situation like this, it's her awakening that is going on here. They even stated in the beginning, like, I'm you from the future. And there's nuance within maybe her meaning in this life is to do this and share it, you know, and whatever way that manifests. And that's what she's doing. But there's many times where what the Cassiopeians say, I would say definitely to present day with the community. And as much as I've just observed in and out in there, I'm not in there all the time, but like I was really like studying it for a bit. And there's a temptation for anything in the current transcript channeled information of the Cassiopeians that is new. They all kind of converse and decide this is something true and let's pursue that kind of thing. So we're talking about like Laura's personal myth kind of being projected onto something we should all practice, already throwing out like any rules of like fractal individuality. Everyone's different. There is no one size fits all, you know. These are some basic things that can get lost in the story of the Cassiopeians and the reptilians and you can forget foundational things that like ground you and remember this is illusion, this is myth, this is you're ciphering information off. And so like one of the ones that was like funny to watch and kind of like dig into was Laura has been a cigarette smoker her whole life and seemed to at some point when she like felt like she was old enough and needed to stop because of her health, noticed the channel got dimmer and it was less energy and it was hard for her to stay in this frequency to channel information. And so then she talks to the Cassiopeians about it when she does have like some connection and basically comes to the conclusion that they're like, it's okay for you to smoke. It's not going to shorten your life. The smoking keeps this channel open, actually. It's something within the nicotine and your acetylcholine receptors, like specifically, and your relationship with it before you got judgmental and took on someone else's idea of like, this is unhealthy, is making it kill you. The thing is not. It's actually good for you, your relationship with it. And so like she takes that and goes, okay, like, so then I should be smoking. And everybody in the community goes, I should be smoking too.
Yeah.
You know, and they quickly move into what's the best tobacco. Okay, so obviously smoking's not good. It's because all the chemicals. Okay, well, the Cassiopeians say, well, it's this clean, organic one you got to get, and you should only smoke it this way. What about the vapes? No, don't do the vapes unless it's this specific vape because it's clean. So you get lost in the, like, we're all going to try to get the best thing and give us an excuse to go, like, smoke. But it's all under this pursuit of, like, oh, well, the best way of being a hierarchical experience of reality is smoking opens your channel and allows you to ascend to 4D, you know, like, and it like very well may be true for Laura and like that it's her and her future. So she's getting herself in alignment. Now, as a cult practice, if you're in the cult, like the responsible thing to do is listen to that and hold that context of like, this is for her. And the message I can get out of this is not the literal, well, I should go smoke too. I've never smoked in my life and it doesn't do anything for me, but now I should do it because I have to get this thing. The message to pick up is the meta-analysis of there are things that you are doing that bring you happiness that you're refusing to do because other people's judgment of it. And so you villainize that as bad, and that's the thing that's making you sick and unhappy. You're
not making this decision based on how your body feels. You're making this decision based on what other people are telling you.
Yeah, or an idea or that what I'm doing right now is not right, and I need to do something else.
The irony.
And so it's putting you, if you get that message from the channel, that's what I'm saying. I listen to that and I watch all that. Don't get caught up in the drama and don't go start smoking when I already know it doesn't resonate with me. So go, what is the lesson here? And that's the lesson that you can derive from that material, though most people wouldn't. Most people would go, I need to smoke, or go, this whole channel is false because this channel, guess what this channel just said to Laura? That you should smoke to get your spiritual third eye turned on. Can you believe the lies? And then it delegitimizes everything.
Right.
So all of it, that's not pulling from this information is having to do a meta-analysis and like pull out what's useful as a lesson, which is the other thing that like the Cassiopeians state. There's certain things that they state that they're like pillars of all of it that pop most arguments being displayed at it. And the thing is, like, one of the core ones is like everything you experience is just a lesson. You guys are putting all the morals and the judgments on top of it, but like it's all just lessons. And they like repeat it a million times and again when certain questions are asked and they're like, you're going down the wrong path. They don't say it directly, but they're like, everything is a lesson. What are you doing, like trying to get an answer that doesn't fall in the bucket of remember everything's a lesson, you know? And so that's why it's, to me, that all of it is very meta and deep because of the like core things that the channel says in the beginning. And I think STS STO is one of those core things that when you understand the depths of that helps you navigate the meta analysis of all of that material.
Right.
Because there's a lot of deception in that. Like in the STO STS thing is
But if you take STS and STO, like some of the STS and STO stuff we talked about 2 weeks ago, the way we're engaging with it is like, okay, we have these clues. This is what we know about STS and this is what we know about STO. There's going to be a choice, you know, and like a lot of what the Cassiopeians said when questions are asked about STS and STO, they're like, no. That's 30% correct, right? And so then you take that stuff and then you're like, for me, it's like I have to find the life experience that I already experienced and I already witness out there in the world.
Well, and I have a perfect one for that STS STO if we want to go into that. Sorry, finish your thought. I didn't mean that.
Well, so I think when you were in the forums, I feel like the way that the people in the forums talked is that they were in a cult, like not in a cult that's necessarily going to land in Heaven's Gate. We'll get to that. But that there was only one truth. And so this is what made us go like, I mean, I wasn't in it, but that you were like, this is off-putting. So in the forum, you could search. So you searched human design and they're like one conversation and it immediately gets shut down because these people live in a world where the C's and only the C's are correct and everything else is false.
It's actually a little more complicated than that. That's what is happening. They've created a narrative around that to believe that they're not doing that. But that is what I deduced.
Yeah.
They've created really interesting narrative around like a search for objective truth and reality and are not holding this goes back to the argument we had a long time ago, not holding the more complex idea that reality is subjective primarily, but then there is objective underpinnings that are usually very extremely refined and simple things that have depths of complexity underneath it, which means also depths of ways to misunderstand it, you know? So
I think there's like a disempowered desire to get to the absolute truth. And I think that when people start following one person as the capital T truth, and they get into the person, you know, the person as the authority, or in this case, the Cassiopeians as the authority, but it's like through Laura, then this is where the cult kind of stuff starts to come up. Because even if the cult leader is not requiring that, you know, even if you're not going to get like punished for not doing that, like people naturally fall in line that way. And scientific materialism is that. Like people are not curious about different perspectives. They're not curious about your anecdotal personal experience. They're like, we've already established what the facts are here. You know what I mean? So I know that like so many things you get into and you immediately want to be like, dude, you got to line it up by all these other things. But then, yeah, because I remember in the height of your Laura night.
Pete really bad. Sorry. Pause your thing. Don't lose your thought.
I don't think I need to say whatever thing I was about to say there. I guess say the thing you were going to say about the STS, STO.
Well, yeah. So I think we've talked, I can't remember when we talked about on the podcast before how deep we went into it, but for instance, in this criticism that this person has with the podcast, there's a lot of the STS, STO stuff they use as some of it is like reason for what they're doing. Like we're trying, as advocates of being, aligned with STO, we're trying to make sure that people know about this and stop Laura from hurting these people. Now, if you understand like the complexities of the STS, STO, you can recognize quickly that is an STS action that they're doing. So when she says we're being STO and we're taking this out, you don't understand what the depths of what the channel's talking about, like STS, STO. It's like, and in fact, you're fulfilling, like, you're proving Laura's work has some validity to it because of how you're attacking, the reasons you're using, and the nuance you're missing, and the depths of which you have not activated certain things in yourself, of your self-awareness, So that's, to me, why there's sometimes people don't even engage with arguments like this, because you're not understanding. You're talking about like surface level shit here,
There's a scientific materialist thing with the receipts and the proof and the whatever.
Yeah, which is in its very nature not the depths of what the STO thing is. And so one of the core parts that helped me like actually get into the nuance was what the cassiopeian stated, and they deduced through a multitude of different questions, is that there is a way to look at this reality as like it's all the programs and across the planning kind of mechanisms that create this infrastructure that ultimately is not harmonic and kind of siphons energy off. The nature of that, like the essence of all the programs, is all STS oriented.
Right.
Energetically, like that's what the energy is. It's taking, but it's so advanced and so complex and it's gone on so long, you don't realize it is. You actually believe the actions that you take that are STS, that do deliver feelings and advancement and the reality, you think those are the good things. But the nature of the reality is if you succeed successfully in the material reality, it's because the nature, the frequency of the reality is STS. So the more you succeed in that reality, the more STS you are actually being. That's why you're succeeding. Quotes, succeeding. That's why you're getting energy in the reality. So all the programs and everything that we're like doing shadow work is like we're releasing and trying to understand the nature of those programs, where they're leading us. They lead us towards a limited reality. And so in its very nature, like STS is a limit nature. It's a urge of limitation. But, you can think that's infinitely complex. We could talk about that forever. Like, what is limitation? It's just not a full understanding of reality. And then you can talk about the positivities of limiting, like I've always think of when I say like to govern something, not like a government, but there was always, when I was a kid, I was a golf cart attendant, and I wanted to take the carts really fast because I was like a young kid. And I realized they wouldn't go. It felt like it should be going faster, but it tops out. Somebody was like, "Oh, there's a governor on it." I was like, "What the hell is that?" He's like, "It's a thing that only allows it to go so fast. It's for the safety because the cart can tip if you're going too fast." So that's a limitation that is helpful for the container of not hurting someone that doesn't yet know how to deal with that much speed. If you do know how to deal with that much speed, you can have the limitation off because you know how to handle it, right? So there's limits that are good. And that's what like the STS reality has built itself on, is like you need limitation to learn certain lessons and experiences. So that's what, there's a divine element in everything, right?
Right.
And so learning that like everything that when we are in our program non-self, when we are in our unconscious state, we are driven by STS action. That doesn't mean you're inherently evil and negative and bad and you're a reptilian. And that's where you can get lost in some of the like projections we do when we understand these words and put them together. It's like, it's not all evil and bad. It's a foundational part of the matrix, right? But if you realize that that's like a parasitic kind of thing, it's gone on for so long, it's run rampant. We're all doing that. So to try to be STO is very against your programming. And it's not in the program of, oh, I just need to do good for others. That's a parasitic program of STS, because why do you want to be good for others? So I can feel...
So you can play the role of being good for others because you are experiencing everyone else as an extension of you.
And you're taking power from them by...
Right.
You know, so that's like it's how it's hidden within it. And so I think there is something that helps you get a hold of the understanding of them when you just go, oh, that's why I have this innate, like, if I just sometimes listen to my like programming, it makes me have bad experiences in reality. You know, it leads me astray. But accepting it as, okay, and let me get my understanding around that. Let me like try to not be that way. And so for me, I'm similar. Like I have to have, if I understand something, if I can correlate it to an experience I've had, it validates it more and allows me to understand some of the nuance. And I would say that for the STS-STO thing, there's, let's break it down a little bit more before I tell that story, is the essence. So service to self is like limit, which would be darkness in the way that like the shadow or darkness like limits light. Light expands the shadow. So light is... or STO is acceptance of everything. It's like, let everything be expansion. So anything is possible, anything infinite, you know, like kind of the ultimate respect of free will and autonomy. And in some ways that's chaos without a little bit of limitation on it, you know, so the extreme of that. But another kind of pillar they say about it is like, a being or an energy that is operating as STO, when it's fully in that function, it doesn't ever limit anything. It doesn't intervene on anything. And so it only actually assists others by being its true self and, when asked, assisting in a way that still respects free will. So not getting too involved in what somebody else is doing and judging whether it's right or wrong. It's trying to assist in a way that has like a bigger picture involved. That would be like a pure STO. And so I think that would look like a being that doesn't intervene in your own development and is very hands off.
Can we just circle back to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and talk about, because I don't think we got into these details. So if service to self is someone who is still living in main character syndrome and just projecting their stories onto everyone around them, people still in service to self meddle, right? They meddle around in other people's stuff. They want to save people. The savior complex is STS. The hero complex, because they're playing out narratives, right? And we've all done it. And you only see other people through your own lens of your thing, right?
Your morals, your judgments.
Your judgments. But if you're truly holding the complexity of understanding that other people are in their own movie, you first of all understand the people you consider bad, like the story of Frank and Laura. You're able to go, I see how both these things ran concurrent. Both people were shitty. Both people thought they were doing that. Both people were doing the best they could with what they had. But then you also understand that the people who are in that forum in a cult experience, and you see this on cult documentaries, like something in them wants to be there. Like the fact that they're with a cult leader, looking for the leader as a fucking authority in their life is a reflection of their internal experience. Because if you're an empowered person, you go in, you get the information, you go, oh, okay, this is interesting, and you fucking move on, because you're not looking for a mommy or a daddy or a fucking savior. You're looking for some data. So the people who get sucked into this, the onus to some extent, like, because this is a reflection of their internal experience. And so they're sinking, and I'm not saying this is or isn't a cult. We'll get into that. But like people who get sucked into cults, that's a reflection of your internal experience. You went looking for something outside of you and you found something outside of you. And so, the further you get into this STO holding complexity thing, that very zoomed out, it's like I look at someone, if I would have looked at someone 10 years ago getting sucked into a cult and felt sorry for them, or even tried to rescue them, or tried to make them see, can't you see? It's bad. And now I go, oh, the part of me that wanted to rescue you wanted to be a savior in your life, because I saw you as a fucking extension of me. And I wanted to play that movie out. And now I'm so zoomed out that I can go, oh, you need to do this to figure out that it was inside of you all the time. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Like, I used to be someone that would if you were in my personal life, dude, I was trying to save people from experiencing addiction, save people from experiencing this, dude. The way I will just sit back and let someone fucking bash their head into a brick wall now is crazy, because it's not my business.
Yeah, it's not your business. You begin to see, like, when you meddle in someone else's reality, like, it pulls you into the drama and the game at all points.
And they don't learn the lesson. They just do what I say.
Yeah. And there is this, like, it's just so nuanced, because it kind of is also communicating, like, you know better than this person what they should do. And it's really hard to understand how someone experiences reality, right? So what you know is right for you, it might not be right for them, no matter how universal your advice seems to be. So just as a little caveat with all of it, like, a truly acting STO being, you would have you wouldn't have a lot of evidence to be able to say, like, that they're doing what they're doing, because they're so hands off, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of, like, the Zen people and people that were, like, true, like, holding enlightenment and reality, they're always these, like, really, you can't nail them down as one thing. They're, like, very malleable, and they're never really, like, taking a stance strongly on anything, you know?
Yeah.
Because they're operating in this place of, like, a deep awareness of, like, everything has a place for existence, and it's all kind of, like, purposeful, and they don't judge, really. And so I think the other thing for me was realizing how much of this is not only just an external, your STS because you're externally doing something, it's an internal thing. So judgments on anybody, that is kind of a manifestation of you saying that shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's a limitation of reality. So all of that kind of judgmental thinking, very rampant in Christian thought, is STS. Like, it's not what you think it is. Okay, so the example that I've experienced is just nature's the greatest teacher, and it's been something that always gives me, like, experiences of other more complex patterns kind of dumbed down into physical form. I've always maybe talked about this in the past before a bit, but I've probably on my personal podcast always been very connected to nature and felt an affinity for all life in all little forms and the innocence of aspects of nature, and was vegan for a while because of it, and was very much, like, always trying to save the innocence of nature, save a herd animal on the side of the road, prevent a coyote from grabbing a rabbit, or all of any kind of death and suffering for nature. I was, like, trying to always save. And in many ways not understanding the way nature functions, kind of personifying a lot of it. And there was a moment when I, like, experienced in Nashville a kind of part of the distillation of everything in my life, and, like, realizing I couldn't control anything, essentially. there was a part of me that like was exhausted with trying to connect with nature and having to wrestle with the fact that it's like all eating each other all the time. It's all dying all the time. Because I realized if I try to save the rabbit from the fox, like the fox is suffering. The fox needs that to live. The fox could be getting that rabbit to go feed its babies, you know, which would also pull on my heart. It's like those poor innocent babies. So how do I get rid of the suffering? Like, how do you do it? And I couldn't do it with nature. You just can't. It's like it's a paradox there. And so I found a fascination with trying to actually sit in it. So if I go and I'm driving on the road and I see an animal that isn't fully killed yet and it's suffering, I would normally get out and go like try to take it out quickly to end the suffering. And instead I thought, what if I just try to pause and stop and witness that? That always was so fiery and I would try to avoid, you know, it felt too much. But I didn't have any other, like I had to surrender to a lot of parts of my life. So I was just like, I have to do it, you know? And so then it became a thing where for like a couple of weeks, like reality just kept handing me those situations. I'd come across an injured animal and like have to sit and do it. In different ways, I'd see suffering where I would just not intervene. And then you start to see a beauty in the way nature just effortlessly goes through those things that we would say are suffering and pain, but they're not really showing signs of actual pain and suffering and resistance to it, you know, struggling and stuff. You do see forms of struggling in an animal getting attacked and dying, but those are animalistic, like like just trying to keep life in the system, you know, right? They're not emotional, psychological processes usually through the animal. So it's an automated function that seems to operate on a different level of understanding of like a macro system of exchange, and like nothing goes to waste. So something dies and it's going to feed everything else. And so there's a part of nature that seems to, when it gets to a point where it realizes it's going to pass through and get exchanged, it just lets go and like moves into it. And I thought that was so fascinating, and it started to make me understand the ways that when I think I know what is the right thing to do, that I'm assuming I know all of these other things that I probably haven't taken into account, that I either could think through and it would give me more information on the decision, or I wouldn't know the answer. So like, how do I know it's the best thing to save this animal when I'm doing that, I'm now making the fox's life difficult? How do I know what is the right thing to do in any situation when on its surface level, some things, when it's like someone is suffering, you want to stop it and you want to help them. But when you start to get really macro in life and think of incarnations of life, and there's a stable part of you that you'd say is your higher self or your soul that is like bopping in and out of these incarnations to get a lesson of some sort. So there's these long lessons that sometimes happen over multiple lifetimes. Again, you can't prove that, but that feels very true to me in my experience of life, that would be a pattern that is occurring. And so at any point, if I'm coming across someone, like let's say the most extreme, I'm coming across someone that is about to die and they're suffering, and there's something that I could do to make them not die, and I stop them, what if that person was on a certain path of a lesson and they were in this incarnation and everything else had aligned for them to get that lesson, and the thing that was going to lock it in and they were actually going to expand and change and learn that lesson was right on the other side of the death portal, right as they died through that and they separated, all of this information would come in and they would have gotten the lesson. But I intervened thinking, I know better, suffering is bad, you need to live. And I save them, and then I complicate their path that they had kind of set up to naturally fall into that lesson and get it. And they might now die later, a week later in a different scenario, and it changes it. Or now they might live to be 100 and die in a different place. And I just intervened and fucked up. And now I'm actually karmically kind of stuck in that exchange, and I did cause a ripple, you know?
Yeah.
That complexity, when I started to realize that, it does make you like really disengage and stop meddling in other people's shit, because you don't really have the full picture. And it's very hard to achieve the full picture of knowing somebody's whole experience through life and how they see the world just in this incarnation, let alone many other, and what their macro soul is actually trying to do and help them get forward and expand, or go the other way and descend. Some of them might be descending and they need to experience some crazy thing of pain, and that you're witnessing. And so that started to get me into the underpinnings of what it is to be STO. It's sometimes extremely radical in being able to sit with the complexity and nuance, diversity of many experiences, and see that there is a time to interact and like do something, but is safer and more aligned with the macro parts of reality is to only when they truly ask you. And even when they're asking you, to be able to discern, are they trying to get saved? And is the better lesson for them right now for me to not save them? And that's, you have to get really meta. You have to be able to read energy. You have to be able to feel what is the right thing. And that it's a super hard thing to do from the programmed reality, where we are caught in these patterns that are all feel like they're doing good, but they're actually not. They're limiting reality. And it's because it's difficult to hold the complexity and hold darkness and see the pain and the suffering and not want to stop it, But why do you want to stop it is where you have to then ask the question. And that can get you further into, there is something here that's making me like uncomfortable. And that might be an STS thing that I'm having to kind of understand more of the nuance within that I don't actually know what the best thing to do here is. So it starts to make you like not want to intervene in a lot of situations and try to hold the complexity of that darkness, and it kind of sense the beauty of it in a certain way. Like it did transfer from me watching, like I've told the story of the crane that I watched slowly die over hours, and it was like really beautiful in this paradoxical dark way, but the effort, the like surrendering to it and moving through it was inspiring. And I can see how that is like an STO stance of a certain perspective. It's very much what nature is doing. It's not afraid to kind of move through existence and the ups and downs and get eaten and eat,
I mean, that really goes back to the romance city of the 55th is falling in love with the entirety of the experience that is available, like falling in love with it without being in resistance to any of it. So many things to tie together. I think that was a great description. I think it is I think you were interested. We're going to go on a road trip, and then I think it will be maybe interesting to listen to a couple of the podcasts from these creators. Not to shit on what they've said here, but much of what they've said here is, I guess not. Well, I don't remember saying that she's harmless. I don't remember talking about her like that, but you've talked about Laura Knight's work. A few people have gotten into it. I think for the most part, people would rather listen to your description of the Cliff Notes rather than read all that. I think we've also covered what's kind of off-putting about her. But a PSA just for anyone: don't blindly follow someone just because Mark talked about like reading their book. Don't, either one of us, like, don't engage. Don't take anything we say about someone's work as a wholesale endorsement for them as a person. Don't have a cult leader. Don't have us as a cult leader. Be your own leader. Don't put yourself in a disempowering position. And then I guess I feel like that's a really natural place to leave it, just because like everything you just said there really does tie into the romance aspect. But I guess I did want to ask what do you think about this stuff about it being like a Heaven's Gate type situation? Is that something you've noted? Like,
I wouldn't say I get the Heaven's Gate vibe. Again, I think modern day cults have the dark parts of them have become very subversive now. They're very like hidden. And so the Heaven's Gate thing doesn't seem like that would be the outcome. But as if we talk about like the essence of what the Heaven...
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask. What's the wave?
The wave?
Yeah.
The concept of it?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, this kind of ties into the answer a little bit, but before I get to the wave, the essence of the Heaven's Gate that I think is a distortion that it can express itself in many different ways is just unquestionable conviction towards what the cult leader or the authority says. So an unwavering conviction of like, I will do whatever you say. And I would say that energy does bubble up and express itself in certain forms within the community there. And it's just a real adherence and not so much of an open mind on some of the pillars of what they've deduced as core ideas to kind of be their alma mater of the thing, of the whole group.
Will Laura Knight, and obviously you're not on the inside, so you might not know. But in anything you've seen, is there a punitive aspect to someone contradicting her, or is it just groupthink? Like, is someone questions or challenges something she says in good faith, by the way, because no one fucking likes bad faith arguments.
Right.
Okay. You come into a Magic the Gathering group.
No. So I think just quick, cause I got thoughts. No, and this is like, I'm just not convinced that she is the problem here, because she is very self-deprecating, very like pushing herself out of the way constantly. And for people that choose not to do that and do it in weird submissive ways, it's like she's just like, okay, you fucking do your thing. She's got a buffer between her and the community. There's an inner circle. And to be honest, anything that I've heard from those inner circle people, I like, and they question her a lot and they question each other. So if there is ever any kind of challenge or criticism on things, they love that, but they have then a mechanism of when you criticize, you have to have these things in line with your rebuttal or your reason why. And I do agree with some of those, because she's creating less likelihood of people coming in and having psychosis with her and challenging something when you're not understanding where she's coming from. So this is the same thing with these people that are criticizing in the comments and made that podcast. The nature of their criticisms is not holding the nuance of what she's talking about. So you're not even on the same level of an argument. So she's all about like, come argue with me and challenge me, because that's how I'm learning, is within my own thing with the channel. She's constantly questioning the channel, going, that's not real. Let me go see if I can find out data for that, and then she spends months, sometimes a year, and then it's like, holy shit, I didn't understand what you were saying, but that is real. Oh my God. So she loves that. Most people that come to make an argument or something are not on that same level. So it's exhausting. She has to kind of be like, well, you don't understand the STS, SDO thing, hyperdimensional reality and all this. I'm not saying I'm Jesus. I'm saying the pattern of all of that is useful. You have to put your own thing. All of these other things, like there's deeply complex and nuanced, and wants to be challenged on those levels because she's using the mechanisms. It's meta. It's very, very deep. So some of those people aren't doing that. In the inner circle, it seems like they all are. And they always have the same questions I do about like some of the cassiopeians' answers. Like, wait, hold on. And they're all learning how to actually like not have the channel anymore by practicing the metaphysics of the Cassiopeian channel and doing it. And so it becoming more and more the transcripts that are modern and happen every month, it's less and less of them asking a question and the Cassiopeians answering. It's one of them asking a question and all of them deducing down what they each know to get to the answer. And then every now and then they'll go, is this a correct way of thinking? And they'll say yes, or go, that's very close, or like, no, that is it, not, and they'll bounce it off.
All very much on schedule, by the way, with Neptune and Aries. So you see Bashar doing less and less channeling.
Yeah. And I would say she's becoming that. But that's a clunky process. You're going to be kind of like having to get the suit on, and there's a lot of distortions through that. And so the part of it that's culty to me is this like external kind of bubble of people that they are trying to get into the inner circle, and that they do have a system of like, you kind of have to prove yourself over time. So you have to have put so many posts in the community. They have to kind of get a sense of who you are, and that you are using the model of reducing down concepts into some objective truth. And all of that is, I like the function of that in many ways. Not being able to hold the real nuanced other mechanism of how we engage as a community is that like subjective reality part. Like everyone's having their own experience. How do we all plug into each other with those disagreements and stuff? That is something that they're probably trying to figure out. I think we all are,
Mm-hmm. Last one we talked about Robert Edward Grant. Your take on that was that the channeling through the AI felt deceptive. What this channeling doesn't feel deceptive to you? And if not, can you define why? Is it just a feeling?
It doesn't feel clear of deception. Like there's distortion, deceptions in it for sure, which I just am beginning to believe that's like kind of always the case, just because of the nature of language and how ideas exist in these like packets, and then you have to dumb them down into language, and the language you choose is based on your version of the way you experience reality. So you're going to lose some of the essence of it naturally. And so I think that there's the parts of it that are a feeling of like, oh, I agree with that, is how I navigate like through continuing to search more validation for that feeling. Like why does it feel this way? Let me figure out the details to it. But throughout the whole time of learning all that stuff, there were many things that come up that I'm like, that feels like that's a bias coming through Laura or through Frank or whatever is playing out, And so those things go kind of to the wayside for a minute until there's more shit that can validate it or whatnot, and you just drop those. So they even say in the C's that at one point they ask, like, is through this channel, like, can STS deceive and distort this? And they say, oh yeah, most definitely. That can happen at all times.
So if you think of STS as the unconscious desire to attribute a narrative to something, that makes a lot of sense. Do you know of the Cassiopeians calling themselves STS at the beginning? And also, does that matter?
Yeah, see, it's in the nuance. I don't think it matters. What did you just say in the beginning? Because I was thinking of something else I was going to add. But that the Cassiopeian said that, or were you saying about the person who made the argument, the law of one?
The person said that in the early transcripts, the Cassiopeians identified as STS.
Oh, that's their narrative. They didn't identify as STS. They identified it as Orion. And Cassiopeia is also a link back to Law of One material stating that Orion and the Cassiopeians are negative entities. They're STS. This is where like the thing, both the Law of One channel and the Cassiopeian channel are essentially from like kind of the same area. And so there's a lot of overlap within it. You could say the Cassiopeians was a little bit more of a modern day open channel, but it still is distorted. And so the Orion thing, I think in the Law of One was kind of understood mostly through, again, that time of the collective, and then the channel's desire of what energy, what information to be getting. Also Carla Ruckert's biases in her own filters of reality, highly Christian leaning. Laura's also Christian leaning, but more open. Laura was a little bit more open-handed with it. Carla, much more rigid and like traditional. And so Orion got disseminated as bad, all good, all bad STS. Really what I think it is the Orion entities that we're perceiving as bad are the ones that like are responsible for the shit we're in. Essentially, there were the ones that are responsible for the shit we're in came from the Orion existence of energy, constellation or whatever. But that's not all of them.
Orion is also the name of Robert Edward Grant's app.
See, there you go. But see, some of this isn't in the nuance. It's like kind of casting an entire civilization as all bad, or entire race as all bad, or an entire biological thing in nature as all bad. There's diversity within it. So at the time of the Law of One, it wasn't necessarily necessary to get into the nuance of that, because the point that was trying to be made only required casting Orion as bad at that point.
Gotcha.
We're evolved now to this point where like they go deep in the Cassiopeian stuff, more into the nuance of these things, never claiming that the Cassiopeians are all good or all bad. You have to discern that for yourself by when you're engaging with that. Are you engaging with a bad one or a good one? And that is discerned over time of like questioning and answering and holding all of these things into account. Most of what the Cassiopeians are doing and what they're saying and not saying and how they're respecting free will leads me to believe it is more STO. Now, does an STS thing come in every now and then? Yeah. And does it come in sometimes just for one sentence to modulate one word so it's a little bit more likely to be misunderstood? Yeah. Like it's that nuance. It can be off and on, like within them trying to get a truth out. And I think that what's so interesting about it is it's so quick and subversive, because you got to remember, to me, the thing that is the parasitic aspect that's trying to water down truths and get you to give them more energy is going to disseminate certain truths or a certain narrative or storyline to make your brain, when you think of that narrative, work a certain way. And that's how it gets in. So it'll tell you a truth and get you to think, like Christianity is a perfect thing. Get you to think about these ideas of Christianity that are wrapped in this blanket of liberation and go to heaven. Think of this because it's going to make you think in a disempowered state, and you can wrap a million different narratives around that to keep that going for a long time. That's what I'm talking about, the mechanics and the fundamental nature of how your psyche is working to make sense of your reality. That is where this like predator existence is, this darkness, deceptiveness, STS, it weeds in through that, through the narrative. So within the channeling thing, that is occurring all the time to get you to understand that information in a disempowered way. And that you can do that with that information. I mean, you can get disempowered by the reptilians, by the blah, 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 blah.
Is that more or less with Robert Grant's work, or would you say it's the same amount and you're just less interested in his work?
Yeah, I would say with Laura's work, there's more open, there's more...
More people, like more critique from within, because they are... I haven't heard Robert Grant acknowledge for a second that some of this could be a projection.
Yeah, it's this more self-awareness within it, and like ways of thinking, and all the way they answer it validates it. Where this is just, you've loaded a bunch of information into this computer AI that we all don't have an agreement on what the AI is even, and so that's all questionable. And then the lack of self-awareness and like shadow projection and all of those parts of reality that aren't really ever discussed in his work. And maybe at a certain point he was into that spiritual stuff, maybe thought he dropped his ego and now he's the thing, but he hasn't actually done a lot of that work.
And no acknowledgement. And I will say that it, from what I've heard, third person of Laura Knight's work, there is an awareness of projection and distortion, and at least with the channel. It doesn't, from what I've heard, maybe not so much in her personal life, but with at least not back when she wrote those books, but with the channel, there is a constant, what is the word I'm looking for, like test to be sure, you know what I mean? And obviously she misses stuff.
Yeah. And so I think that validates it more for sure. But it's not to say, like, I think there's a lot of deception within the cassiopeian stuff. It's just more useful. I mean, the deception and the AI stuff's useful too, to understand how that could be presenting itself. But also, I think with just the AI thing, I'm something happens whenever I hear an AI start rattling shit off, no matter if it's just for taxes or anything. And I can hear it when someone, has gotten their dialogue written by AI, and I don't know why I have an aversion to that.
Well, I really don't like how it talks. I always skip the paragraphs and just look at the bullet points to get the facts.
It's hard to understand especially when you have the voice thing on and it's reading it.
I hate
But then even when someone else is reading it, there's an essence and like a flavor in the way any information comes out of that system that it's hard for me to focus. I can hear some of it, and then I just find myself like actively, my mind is trying to be pulled away from it. Like,
yeah, it's interesting. It's crazy to me how many people have AI writing their posts. And like I said, I think that chatbots, a summarizer, there's a lot of ways in which it's useful to be able to, because essentially you're Googling things, to be able to Google things in a specific way with like variables and stuff, rather than having to read 25 websites and 25 Reddit posts to figure out how to apply this information to your specific thing. And when I'm asking questions, because I can ask questions from one side and then ask questions from another side, it's going to give me two different answers because that's how it functions. I then say, can you give me your sources? And then I go through and read the sources, and I'm like, man, I don't even really know where you got this impression. I find it, if you're using it correctly, to be a great tool for teaching yourself huge swaths of information in a short period of time, or being able to get into something. But if you don't understand that it picks up what your perception is and then is answering in that way, or you're taking everything it says as fact, not understanding that if you just ask the question different, it's going to give you the different perspective. Weird. But anyway, the people that are then copying and pasting what the thing is saying and then presenting it as their voice. And I don't even mean, because when I very first started using it, before I noticed its voice, I used it for bouncing off notes for doing a course and stuff, I would just use like the bullet points and then just riff on them or whatever. It's like, whatever. But it has the exact same fucking voice. Like, it has the exact same cadence. So when someone presents it in like an Instagram, carousel,
you can feel it.
I'll read it. I'll be like, oh, this is good. And then I'm like, this is AI. I don't have all the fucking moral baggage with it. It's like, okay, but I can tell. Everyone can tell.
Yeah.
You didn't even bother to take out the "you're not broken." You didn't even bother to take out the catchphrases. Yeah, I hate listening to it speak audibly. It really bothers me.
And I can't tell, for me, in my myth and narrative, I'm trying to find a thread that it makes sense, where it's like, oh, is this, because I do have a sense, I'm not afraid of AI, and I don't think it's there's something that's beautiful in what is beginning to become a more advanced tool to enhance the human experience. But coming from this broken reality, there's a weird liminal space that is similar to the Garden of Eden thing, where you're in this liminalness and you're opening up, and then somebody there's a sparkly little thing over here that you kind of look at and you get entranced with, and you get pulled into it just when the door was opening over here, and you kind of get lost into that. Mm-hmm. And that's what it feels like with the separation and division we all have, and the loneliness. It's a ripe time to just kind of be pulled into this distraction that then just play forward a couple of years. You don't know how to get back to where you once started. It's a hall of mirrors. And so am I averse? I have an aversion to the tone of this thing, because there's a thing where I'm connecting to the future or the past that I was when this certain frequency comes on, have your bearings on straight, like keep your eyes open and clear for where the deception is, so you don't get pulled in,
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what if I'm feeling like that cadence and that thing, that's that like don't listen to that,
Yeah.
But I don't know, or if I don't understand it or what. Like it feels like we're in this transition where like there is a potential to get lost again and pulled in, to a new comfy limited
they
jail
really
cell.
want to make this AI robot fucking transhuman like timeline happen. Like now I'm just like robots. You could buy a $20,000 robot. It just doesn't. I may eat these words. It does not feel like where we're going.
And I agree, but it does feel like where some are going.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point. But like it in some ways it feels like predictive programming or an attempt at predictive programming. Like if we stayed exactly in the cross of planning, then yes, I think we would end up in dystopia. But the cross of planning is dying, and all of the ability to fucking build things that way as a global society building infrastructure that supported capitalism and billionaires, I see that going away. And so much of this like attempt to create this robotic whatever reality, it's like I'm going to continue to try to understand technology as it comes, because I do not want to be, I'm only halfway through my life. I do not want to not know how to fucking operate my cell phone like my parents. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel. I'm not speaking for everybody, because we're not going to live in an everybody reality. But I just don't. Whatever they're trying to make happen right now, I just don't think it's going to work out. Anyway, I have to get off this train soon. So the last thing I want to ask is what the wave is, because I thought that was something interesting that they said, but it doesn't align with what I understand the wave to be at all. There is an interesting conversation about fundamentalist Christians. This is like Christian with a lot of rules, right? This is a really interesting thing about left-wing people who left fundamentalist Christian like childhoods and then got rid of all the supernatural God stuff, but then didn't decondition any of the fundamentalism. So they love to like punish and shame and have like extreme black and white views and have an in-group and out-group, and it's all just repackaged fundamentalism. I think that's interesting. I think that's interesting how many people end up in the New Age movement or wellness movement or whatever that still haven't deconditioned that. So that's interesting. But my understanding of the wave is not like the rapture. So can you explain what the wave is?
Yeah, so the way that cassiopeians say it, her whole series is called The Wave. So we could say that that's like the overarching theme is that there's a giant change upon us, and their interpretation of this energetic shift is that there is a wave coming, and it's a part of a natural cycle of gigantic cycles of other energies moving about in a synchronistic, harmonic way that is outside of our understanding. That this is a natural cycle that happens in different ways. And so they correlate this wave to a lot of, in the past, cometary planet bombardments that have reshaken the earth or like reshaped it, shaken things up, ended certain cultures and birthed new ones. But it's a part of a natural cycle that sometimes manifests as comets, what you'd say is a material thing coming down and slamming in and starting something again. And sometimes it's like the equivalent of if you have to burn a field to get the nutrients back, you sometimes annihilate everything, so the perspective of the plant that's getting burned, it's a cataclysm, apocalypse. Macro cycle, it's just we're regenerating this farm.
This is why Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything is going to manifest like this, where there's going to be this interpretation of, to get there, we have to die, and that there very well could be that in certain incarnations of this cycle, that's what had to happen. But my understanding is that this cycle's coming around again, but every now and then when these cycles do, it comes a time where there's a cometary blast, or I would say instead of putting the comets on it, because in the past it has been physical, they say this time it's optional, physical or not. And so it's an energy change, and they would say, to refine it, it's a realm border crossing that is happening on the cusp of this wave. And that's what makes it optional. So the energy is coming for an upgrade to essentially, like, the garden is ready to be harvested. And when there's a realm border crossing, that means there's a lot of plants that can be harvested that are capable of existing in a different realm. And so when this wave comes, the ones that are capable and are in the right frequency are ready to be harvested, get pushed into that realm. And it's a nuanced thing where it's not like the alien ship shows up and brings you over to the realm. It's like your reality virtually blends into that. And so when you're in that frequency, you experience the wave as essentially like this fourth density reality, like kicking in, and your frequency modulating into that, and you having a co-relation with that new earth, which is a quick manifestation, half less dense, half material, half light, and all of those things that come with that. You know, the upgrade in the game, you get new weapons, you get new superpowers, you have new cloaks to wear, you have new enemies, there's a new map. All of those things come online. But then the people that are not in that frequency, which essentially just haven't grown enough in time in this harvest to like make the cut, then get put back into the soil. And so they experience a cometary blast bombardment, and what they know of reality blows up. So that, and I would say take all of the physical representations of what I just said kind of out of it to really get what the wave is talking about. And that is then everything that they discuss after that, the STS, STO, metaphysical nature of reality, dimensional thing, is to orient you where you are. And their thing is like, it's not a matter of where you are on the physical reality or what you're doing. It's your frequency that dictates where you're going and when this wave happens.
Takes us back to the 55th.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, some people will be experiencing a whole new like plane of existence that is, you know, being in love with every single aspect of the human experience, while other people experience an absolute hell.
Yeah, and under this guise, I mean, you can apply so many things to that idea of the wave. I mean, that resonates with the rapture shit that people have talked about. It's all kind of misunderstandings or past representations of this moment where there wasn't enough harvestable beings to manifest a realm border crossing on the other side of this wave that then lands in some kind of new stability. There wasn't ever enough, so then that's the experience that it had. So they put it down in books as this rapture, like only some people got chosen. And, you know, maybe the rapture, they did realize like some people did go somewhere and they made it out and we didn't, you know. It's all these interpretations of an energy shift that can be seen in many different ways. But I what I think is cool is like you really tune into the awareness of consciousness that is always present. There are many cycles that happen like that are similar in its nature of the grand cycle, but your experience within it is new every time. So there is like, you're on the cusp of a new cutting edge, like experience, like where it hasn't been happened or shaped before in the same way. But the grander pattern happens that there's always this up and down and then this realm border thing. And so it's not happening the same exact way as it's happened before. There's always something new and fresh under that. And so the other idea, like the realm border crossing, is coming with entities that are on the other side of that are 4D, that you have, that's where you could say like your soul family is and everything. They're right on the other side of that. So when this happens, you reconnect with your higher self, your like that thing, you're now in touch. Mm-hmm. But they don't intervene before that wave because they know that's that whole STO thing. They don't save you or wreck. They're like, shit's about to happen, you know, and you're about to get reunited. Kind of another idea they talk about. But then there's also nefarious beings on that realm border wave trying to capture other beings into fourth density reality in an STS frequency. So that's where you find there is like a lot of black magic kind of manipulation happening in the New Age spiritual movements, because that's ripe for advanced beings that understand fundamental reality but haven't gotten through their shadow and are now just really useful automaton tools in a 4D reality that are enslaved and don't realize it, but they're advanced, you know?
Yeah, so something I saw about the cross of Sleeping Phoenix is that there will be a massive proliferation of scams and cults, and people who have not stepped into their own radical self-responsibility and personal authority and power will just constantly be falling for scams and cults.
And they're like so advanced now because you have the LARPing nature of the AI and the interconnectedness of information. They're advanced.
Yeah.
The deception is advanced. That feels like their way. It's like there is a point of no return when you put too much attention into that, you know, your awareness into that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that this comment gave us some interesting stuff to talk about. And there was other stuff listed on here for why she's bad. I just didn't get into it because I've already asked you off the mic if you knew anything about that, and you didn't. But listen, I will be watching that documentary. And I think that the creator here just probably Googles, you know what I mean, searches, and I must have put her name somewhere in the thing or
well, if you're listening again, I'm open to have an open discussion about it, because I think I'm not invalidating anything that they're saying. I think it brings up interesting ideas around the info that is in the Cassiopeians, and I think there's interesting shit to discuss, you know.
I've noticed through this, because we talked about this and I talked to Jaleesa about this a lot, like the people that I am attracted to in life, romantically or in friendships, are people who are not threatened at all by the other side of a conversation ever. As a matter of fact, everyone, myself and everyone that I really like trust, because the trust is really in this, are like, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, there's an expose on someone that on someone whose book I just read. I want to hear that. Almost like nosy, you know what I mean? Spiritual nosiness. And then when I listen to it, I'm not, I guess just because I'm not someone who believes in like an absolute truth, I'm like, oh, okay, I like that part. That's a little short-sighted. Like, okay, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Oh, does that change the context? And so when I think about the TikToks or Reels that I send you, or I send Jaleesa, or I send, Tim, or I send Aaron, or I send people that I really do like and trust in my life, it's enjoying both sides of things. And something I find annoying, but also I don't feel safe with people who have like one rigid opinion. I mean, I had a friend break up over this recently. And then when I'm like, have you ever looked into what the other side says? And they're like, no, they feel threatened. And they're like, no, you can't listen to them talk, I'm always like, well, how do you have a fully formed opinion on something that you haven't, that's why I didn't feel super comfortable just like going too hard on Edward Grant, because whatever that guy's name is, because I haven't taken the time to listen because it's not something I'm interested in. And you can't know. Like, I can't have an opinion on something because a TikToker told me, or a clip taken out of fucking context. Because of course there's context to these conversations. Like, I'm not going to be radicalized by fucking 30-second clips. I don't want to be in it. You know what I mean? I don't want to embarrass myself. So like, one other thing I wanted to say about STS and STO, when we were making fun of Aubrey Marcus, something that was like making my stomach turn while I was down that rabbit hole. Now listen, I love messiness. I love some gossip. I love reality TV. Like, I love watching that sort of shit unfold. That situation to me is funny. And these people are so rich, they have to like create some chaos in their life, and they're high on drugs, and I respect it. You know what I mean? It's not my department, but I respect it. And I was really grateful for that opportunity. Like, I had so much fun with that. And we did the episode on it, and in no way did I want that episode to get back to them. I mean, I don't give a shit if it gets back to them, but I didn't put out the episode so that I could stop people from fucking, joining his harem, or like to correct him in any way, shape, or form. I'm like, yeah, this is the logical conclusion of your energy. You know what I mean? Of course, ISIS told you needed to take on a second, younger, hotter wife. Of course, the comments on his posts made me like not like that we even put out that episode, because the amount of people that were like, brother, you gotta think about what you're doing, brother, you need to change this, you just yelling at him and yelling at her, yelling at the other girl. And I'm like, oh, mind your business. Like, it's one thing to just talk shit, you know what I mean? But I'm not gonna cross into these people's aura and tell them what to do. Let them do whatever the fuck they want to do. They put it on the internet, so I'm allowed to laugh at it, you know what I mean? And talk about what I see there, but I'm not going to go try to correct them or tell them that they shouldn't be doing that. Like, look at them. Of course they should be doing that. This is exactly what the node, right? And then the last thing I want to say about nodes, I imagine the giant imagination that we are a part of just has all these tiny, tiny tentacles coming off of it. And every little tentacle has a light coming off of it, and then a bunch of little, I don't know, like hairs, right? And every single one of us is one of those little nodes. And we are all expressions of the imagination.
Hairy nodes.
Little tiny hairy nodes. There's the episode name. Did you say that?
Hairy nodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
hairy nodes of the imagination.
Now, like the disco ball metaphor, where each one of those little tiny mirror squares are pointing at a different piece. And in order to make a map of consciousness, you need information from every single one of those little nodes, right? And so for those of us who find great joy in creating this map of consciousness, I need to listen to all of the nodes. I have to listen to the node that is the Laura Knight, and then I also have to listen to the person that says she's evil, and then I also have to listen to the person that says they're both wrong, and because I'm creating this kind of like little map, right? Didn't we have something like that when we were kids, like that kind of a puzzle? The need for every single person to meet your purity test of morality in order to listen to their POV on reality, I don't get it. I don't resonate with it. If you're going to be in my personal life, our morals need to be aligned. But if you're a stranger I'm never going to meet, I can read your fucking book or listen to your song or watch your movie. I don't really care to know who you are, like, at all. I don't care about you as a person. All art is channeled. Music is channeled. It's all channeled. You were an open enough channel to let this in. I don't care to worship you or hate you. I don't care about you as a person. Some of my favorite fucking pieces of context that I get from TikToks, I couldn't tell you the name of the TikToker. Mm-hmm. I feel bad because I never credit people because I'm like, I don't know. I'm not trying to marry that. I don't attach to personalities like this, So I talk about robes all the time, and then every once in a while someone would be like, Penny Kelly. I'm like, I don't even think about that bitch. She was a channel. Do you know what I mean? She was a speaker that something came to. I'm not trying to marry the lady. I don't give a shit about her. I like this one thing that she made, And so it is interesting. I think it's maybe that we're wired very individually, that we don't necessarily like look at things that way. But I can tell when I'm talking to someone who can only ever look at one side of a thing, and I don't like it. I don't trust it. I don't trust them as people. But it also is like, it's scratchy and screechy in the ether. And it's like scared. It's like a scared, anxious energy that like a raccoon that's going to fucking bite you because they don't have all the information, because they don't have curiosity, because they don't have capacity. And they're afraid of, like, there are people on the internet who are like, how do I learn about herbal medicine without falling down the alt-right pipeline? And it's like, you're afraid you're going to fall down the, what? What? I don't understand that way of looking at the world at all. I'm like, how are you not like unsettled when you don't have all of the information? Like, aren't you afraid you're absolutely fucking wrong? Which, I mean, whatever, being wrong, who gives a shit? But like, how do you so confidently speak on a topic when you've not listened to the opposing argument? Like, how do you know that you're...
Well, and this kind of, you can go back to the STS argument of like, if everything is programmed STS, when you think like that and you try to binary everything and you say, I'll be this way, the old reality used to reward you for doing that. It builds infrastructure, right? It's like, all the doctors go do this and you have to study like this, do all that. It builds it. So there is a part of us that's not deprogrammed that thinks when we unify things or when we put everybody on the same page, that means success. That means we start to get along, reality functions. Because it's shown that pattern over and over and over for these last 100, 200 years, whatever it is, when it's been prime. So the reality is expanding into this hyper individuality. Like, we're going to see the real diversity of experience. And you're in resistance to that because we're programmed to refine and restrict and limit. So that's why it sounds scratchy to you. That's why it sounds like, what do you, because it's not holding, it isn't for a new reality. It is the parasitic thing expressing itself through somebody that isn't conscious enough to get the message, is trying to put out fire with fire when you're talking about a huge reality being of, energy that's trying to siphon off things. It's like, well, you're not going to win doing that.
Yeah, and I guess it's occurring to me right now that if you've got a pre-settled opinion on every fucking thing, you could listen to the exact same long form podcast and come back with a completely different impression because you've already written the story in your head anyway, so it's not like taking in the info would help you. I learned about astrology because in church, and I have to say, this is probably why this rubs me the wrong way. In Mormonism, they said, doubt your doubt. You should doubt your doubt. If you're feeling doubt, you should doubt that rather than investigate. And in Christianity, the kind of Christianity that I was in, everything was fucking demonic. So like when people tell me like Laura Knight's a channeling and also a fundamentalist Christian, I'm like, where's that church? Because everything was demonic. Like, you can't channel and also be of God because there's one fucking like scripture that says that divination is evil. So I don't know what kind of fundamentalist Christian that is, unless they're just saying like she hasn't deconstructed that. But oh my God, Justice, so many fucking side quests. This is what happens.
I want to go on a side quest about that. I mean, Jesus.
But hold on. So when I was a Christian, we were told that astrology is demonic because of that scripture. Mm-hmm. So were tarot cards, so was everything else. Not only were those things demonic, you were not allowed to look into them to understand them because that was a deception that would pull you in.
Perfect. That's a wonderful fucking hiccup that they put in there. It's great.
That is what it reminds me of when people are talking about something. They're like, oh, this podcaster said this. And then I'm like, that's a clip, right? Did you watch the 10 minutes before and the 10 minutes after? No, I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to give them any fucking blah, blah. And I'm like, or people talking about the pipeline, like this is just like a vacuum sucking people in rather than going, what's pulling people in, like what's making people resonate with that? Because I can watch tons of right-wing shit and not get pulled into it because I don't fucking resonate with it, right? So it reminds me of that Christian thing, don't listen to it, don't look into it. So I remember backsliding, like being on drugs and stuff, but still believing I was a Christian and still believing that was right, just thinking I was sinning. And telling someone, it's so funny because I was on meth already, telling someone that astrology was demonic, which is just some shit I was told in church that like I was told so many times I believed it. And you're in that world, you're really conditioned that going like, well, what the fuck does demonic mean? Is demonic, right? And so, and this was an issue with me in church because at one point I got a hold of the Greek Hebrew. I asked for one for Christmas. My mother-in-law, pastor, got it for me. And then I immediately was like, sin just means walking backwards. Why are we talking about it like it's sex and stuff? Or like repent just means change your mind and turn around, or change your mind, turn around and walk the other way. Why are we not? And everyone's like, shut up, Jessa. But anyway.
You demon.
But there are just a lot of things that I'm just like would say that I believed that I like hadn't, actually processed. And so somebody at a party was like, what do you mean it's demonic? Someone who astrologer. And I was like, it's like demonic. It's like sent to deceive us. Deceive us about what? I don't know. They're like people in the Bible were using astrology. Like it's science. It's just patterns, And I'm like, no, it's like, I don't actually know why. And so then I bought my first astrology book to read it to prove it was demonic.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately was like, oh, this is just pattern. This is just patterns. Why would patterns be demonic? And so it is sort of that thing. It's like how many opinions we all walk around or we pick up, open ajna, pick up off of the internet or whatever that aren't even our own opinions, but we just pick them up. And then it's like, if you can't go look at the other side and then form your opinion from what you've seen from the other side, then your opinion might not actually be so much yours.
Yeah.
After all.
That's what my favorite thing about the Christian like argument that channeling's demonic, anything that's like the spirit, it's all demonic. The vicious loop or like paradox that like nobody wants to chase back through curiosity is that the most of the stuff that is the foundation of Jesus's teaching in the Bible is when you really get down to brass tacks is all channeled from something, right? But they call that the one that knows, it's God, it's Father, and he chose his son, so like we trust that one. But there's no factual proof evidence, and so they use the same thing about spirituality and astrology. There's no evidence, so like that's demonic. It's like that you did the same thing a long time ago, and like there's spent so much time. We put all these other stories and narratives on it and understandings of that concept that we've put it in this other direction. And so it's like it's the same fucking thing, and then the other aspect that fundamental Christian thing, like painting Laura as that is again why I kind of stopped listening to the podcast because I understood their argument is if you picked up that she's a fundamentalist Christian still, like you didn't read the info. You just didn't read it because that's not at all what she is. Now you could argue that like there are some core mystical Christian ideas that she through time has been able to go, these hold true in Christianity, and I carry these with me in my myth, my version of reality. But they are like alchemized and distilled down, and all of the bullshit, lots of the bullshit around Christianity, who Jesus is, who Paul is, who all these big figures that like really were a part of creating that religion. Like she's been able to distill down into siphon out the esoteric stuff from Christianity, and has a whole book that I guarantee you these people have not read, which I have not even fully read because it is a giant, about the deconstruction of Christianity, like through the core lens of like this Paul, Mark, and Jesus kind of circle of belief that kind of centered around all of the teachings of it and the dogma that went forward, and brutal research that took her years to figure out where that deception is in that specific religion. She's not fundamentalist Christian by any standards of it if you read it, and listen to her talk about it openly. And how many issues she has with that, the culture's version of that religion. And to me, it does a very good service for the Christian that has been pulled in and is wanting to deconstruct. A lot of really helpful information she has been able to pull out to give you kind of a map of where to put that information and not just throw it out with the baby out with the bathwater. Like, figure out how to siphon it out, Like, she does a lot of work on that. Spent many parts of her life doing it because she was so fundamentally Christian from the beginning,
So we have to cook dinner. We've been podcasting since breakfast. Do you want, if these people happen to come back and listen to this podcast, do you want to connect with them and talk to them? Or I don't get the impression that I get the impression that they are on a mission to save people from her work or something. I don't get the impression that they're like looking to have a debate on their podcast or whatever, or have someone bring clarity or whatever. So it probably just is like, we hold two different perspectives, but I'm not trying to advocate for Laura or her cult or any of that stuff. I'm not defending anything. I'm not interacting with that information in the same way that they are. And so they've come to a specific conclusion and felt responsible that they need to disseminate their opinion as the ultimate truth around it. And it's just not that kind of information. So it's fun to talk about. Like, for me, when someone says all those things, I'm immediately like, oh, interesting. Like, I hear you, but here's the information that I got from it that like makes what you're saying actually not hold much weight, Yeah. But I was once at that same spot and like trying to figure those out. And so here's what I figured out, and none of those arguments held true except for the ones that I never heard. Like, there's some darker stuff around this information that has not been released and things that are being hidden. And so I don't know any about that. And if you don't know anything about her trying to murder someone?
No, but I have heard stories of, bits that they share that they've redacted some personal information from certain stories, but that are very complicated psychological, attacks and relationships that were happening with people that created a lot of serious tension and things with people that she, dances around, which feels
could
like
maybe be murder.
Yeah, there could be something dark in that, but I don't get vibes from Laura that she like is murdering someone or sending somebody to do like that's not the game. That's not it. Like, so but if something, who knows, like there is some MK Ultra psychological shit and psychosis happening, like that could be tied back to her or something. I'm open for all of that. But
we'll watch the fuck out of that documentary. I tell you.
Yeah,
what.
and I'm listening. Like I saw that one podcast, and then I went today just to like look through it again, and I was like, oh, there's a whole other one, and there's a bunch of information. There's a whole playlist on Laura stuff. So I'm listening to all that because again, I think it's interesting to learn more about it, and for me, it just makes me understand the shit more because I'm like, oh, this is the thing that she was talking about, like the way that this expresses itself. Interesting. Let me watch their moves, what they're doing, and their reasons and stuff, because it amplifies the material.
All right, that's it. Love you. Bye.
Bye.